Okay, so let's get started. So those of you who don't know me, my name's JD Swanson. I've been a program officer with NSF for about the past 6 years. Previously to that, I want to highlight that all of my career, basically as a professor, has been spent in EPSCoR jurisdictions. I worked at and attained tenure in institutions where we did not have enough funding to be able to photocopy anything except for tests and syllabi. So I understand exactly where many of you come from. I have lived it, and I have been part of it. I have also been part of multiple track ones, okay, over my career. So, I just want to give you that as someone, as we're sort of moving forward. Also, I am also a first-generation college grad, right? My father left school at the age of 12 to become a pig hunter. Okay, so when we look at these opportunities, the thing that I think is absolutely critical about EPSCoR and my thinking about it, hands down, is that it's about empowerment. Okay, and that's what every single person in this room is here for, period. So with that, the thing that I really want to point out is that over the time we've spent a lot of time really receiving a lot of input and feedback, and you saw the timeline that Sandra sort of gave us from 1979 right through to now, and sort of what we've done is we've really looked at that over time and really looked and created hybrid theories of changes and logic models. You've seen some of those. Additionally, we've also received multiple feedback very, very recently, including things like our strategic plan, the Chips and Science Act, the 2M research report, which I'll refer to a little bit, and of course the Future of EPSCoR report, which was created by the community for the community. So some things that really came out of that 2M report, and this is available on our website, just Google 2M EPSCoR, boom, there it'll be. What you'll see is some things that came out that were really critically important was that it identified key elements or key themes that were critical to be able to build research capacity. And you can see those highlighted below. So these are things that have really settled in our brain as we've thought about these. Additionally, we also, as Sandra mentioned, have talked about timescale and the uniqueness of our jurisdictions. So as we think about this cross-pollination of what's there, resource acquisition, knowledge production, attractiveness, and so forth, coupled with time frame, we realize that really unique approaches are absolutely critical. And also to be able to move or affect research capacity at scale and speed, as the director sort of requires us to build and empower you to be able to make those changes. And to do that, in order for us to be able to do that, we had to implement new programs to be able to do it, to help you become, or to really place that empowerment upon you to build what you want to be. And that's what these programs are intended to do. So the thing that's really important and the thing that's incredibly striking, after working in 2 EPSCoR jurisdictions myself, you realize that the needs are very different. And upon becoming a program officer, you realize they're as varied as the individuals and the political and the socioeconomic and the research infrastructure. It's all merges together. And so really what we've really looked at is that we require a research ecosystem approach that's dynamic and can be tailored to every single jurisdiction's unique needs. And so what does that research ecosystem look like right now? Well, you can imagine here's various components of it, right? We have things like our community and stakeholders. We have our jurisdictional EPSCoR steering committee. We have our track ones, our other EPSCoR RI investments. We have NSF investments on the whole. We have our vast array of academic institutions. We have other jurisdictional and local sectors, including state and local governments. We have partnerships with other sectors, with tribal partnerships, public and private partnerships. And we also have other federal infrastructure, including NIH, NASA, USDA, and so forth. All of this makes the total jurisdictional research ecosystem. And that's the level that we want to think about. This is what we want to advance, yeah? And so what we've done is we've really spent a lot of time creating 2 new opportunities that we expect will do multiple things. First of all, provide more opportunity for each jurisdiction to be aware of and develop to its own unique strengths and or responds to its own unique challenges. Number 2, we expect that it will develop collaborations across the jurisdiction to be able to build research capacity for and across the jurisdiction. And both of these ERIs and ECOR are not single institution awards. They are based in terms of at a jurisdictional context. The third thing, we expect that these will position the jurisdiction to be competitive for wider NS funding beyond EPSCoR. At the end of the day, EPSCoR funding is a massive 2.5% of the NSF budget. How do you get amongst the other 97%? Okay, we are the established program to stimulate competitive research. The next piece is also to provide a mechanism for the jurisdiction to be able to respond and develop dynamically in real time to its needs in a matrix-type strategy. And what we expect is that this will lead to jurisdictional-driven research competitiveness and thus the EPSCoR goals, which every single person in this room believes and works so hard to accomplish. And so what we've done is we've released 2 new solicitations hot off the press, right? You have no idea the amount of work it took to get these out by yesterday. Just putting that out there. I think I'm a little bit grayer as a result. Anyway, we have these 2 opportunities. One of them is, of course, eCore. The other is, of course, eRISE. And if I had to break these down into simple language, I'm a simple guy, right? The first one is the eCore is all about fundamental jurisdictional-wide research infrastructure. The second, eRISE, is about topic-specific jurisdictional-wide research infrastructure. And so something that becomes important, and I just want to sort of point this out, if you go through these, because I have nothing better to do ever, is if you look up the number of times, notice the word jurisdictional-wide, and jurisdictional-wide is here. If you just go through the solicitation and look at the number of occurrences of institution versus jurisdictional, you notice that institution appears 53 times in the eRISE solicitation and 80 times in the eCore. The word jurisdiction appears 123 times in eRISE and 208 times in eCore. I'm giving you a hint. So the thing that's really important is that these, and what I'll attempt to do as we go through, I want to interlace this in my discussions to address all of these. We've really taken to heart all of the suggestions and recommendations from the Future of EPSCoR report. But the thing is that with us really working to do that, I present a challenge to you. And that's one of the things that you're going to have to do is you're going to have to prioritize what is right for you in your jurisdiction, in your context. And so how does eCore and eRISE fit into our ecosystem? How do we envision it? Well, what you can imagine, if this is our envisionment, if this is our ecosystem as we sort of described before, what we imagine is that eRISE, these incubators, will sit here, right, under investments. States can select areas of science that you want to build and push forward to become excellent at. Meanwhile, the eCore will sit here, and eCore's role is really special. It's about linking, irrespective of scientific topic, all of the entire ecosystem together. We imagine now that it's no longer sort of these siloed, individualized efforts to build research infrastructure, but rather a synchromesh gear, a true ecosystem where one part connects and responds and functions with the other. And eCore is the linchpin that helps tie that together. And notice we're calling eCore, we are more than happy, as you already know, to fund multiple eCores in a jurisdiction. Likewise, multiple eRISEs, responding directly to the future of EPSCoR. The other thing that's really important, and I want to highlight this as well, is the only way that you can do this to be able to build your ecosystem and develop your statewide research ecosystem is through a continual process improvement cycle. And you can see that right around the outside, right? Yeah, I had to squish this into the slide, right? But you can see that sort of building round and round. And so the question is how do you do that? How do you create this research improvement cycle? Well, one of the mechanisms is that we expect that the eCores will partner with the jurisdiction EPSCoR steering committee, something we've required for years. But what we've done is we've provided them with a job. We've provided them with a role, but we've also relaxed a lot where the role is completely redefined, well, partially redefined, and the membership is also loosened. So you can make it directly to what the unique needs are of your institution. So what we see them playing a key role connecting entities beyond the traditional NSF EPSCoR reach, beyond your reach. They are the individuals in the state that can reach to those individuals or entities that you may or may not have had access to. And they provide that 35,000-mile view. The second thing is that it's really important as you're thinking about your jurisdictional steering committee is make sure that it's wide and diverse. Make sure it covers all varieties of sectors, diversity of institution types, perspectives, individuals, because that's going to be critical, that represent your jurisdiction. What they're going to do is they're going to be charged in working in a co-productive manner, not a hierarchical manner, to work with the ECORs and others that are in the ecosystem to understand the dynamic research ecosystem that is your jurisdiction. They're going to be able to help you hopefully provide connections for networks to develop where appropriate. And we also expect them to work with the ECORs and others to continually assess and identify jurisdictional research strengths, challenges, and barriers to help provide demonstrable evidence. And so we also hope that they will also help you create those roadmaps, those living documents of S&T plans, which I'll talk about in a sec. The other piece as well is that we've also mandated that 5% of each ECOR budget will be allocated towards these activities. So here's how we imagine it. Here's our ecosystem written another way, right? What we have is we have our ECOR RII, we have co-production between the jurisdictional steering committee, and what they do is they connect, right? This is the idea. And what you might find is, say, for example, state and local government. What you may find is that individuals on your EPSCoR steering committee will have strong relationships with that state and local government. You can leverage those across the ECORs in ways that you may not have been able to do previously. So about that sort of bridge building or relationship building sort of idea over time. And so as we sort of look about it, the EPSCoR steering committee and also the ECORs will work together in a co-productive manner. And the idea is that they will create a jurisdictional science and technology plan, a living document that not only says where you want to go, but it does a real true, and if you read some of the track 1 solicitations about having a true and honest look at where your jurisdiction is, what our hope is that your jurisdictional science and technology plan will do that. It'll show the strengths, the needs, and the challenges within that jurisdictional ecosystem, and it will develop over time. It's not just this 5-page document that you write, say where we want to go. It's how it describes the ecosystem of your jurisdiction and provides you with that roadmap, if you like, to move. And so what it will do is it will ideally identify priorities, both in terms of fundamental research infrastructure, which will be addressed by the ECOR mechanism, but also in terms of opportunities to build research strengths, which is addressed by the ERIs. So, how do I become part of this? Well, what you find is that institutions you have basically a bifurcating sort of option for FY23. Institutions with an RII Track 1 award that's in the final year, no cost extension, or having been completed, have 2 options. You may either apply to an RII Track 1, as you probably planned right up to probably yesterday. Don't yell at me, don't hate me. Alternatively, what you can do is you can pivot. You have the option to pivot to both EPSCoR Collaborations for Optimizing Research or ECOR RIIs. Additionally, if you have any institutions in your jurisdiction that are not currently involved in an RII Track 1, they have the ability to connect together and take part of the new ERIs or ECOR solicitations today. Okay? And what we intend to do is we intend to phase this in, obviously, as you come off your Track 1s over time. So just to make this absolutely crystal clear, any institution currently involved with a Track 1 in years 1 to 4 is not yet eligible to apply to the current competitions for ERIs and ECOR. So you know when you submitted the grant, you know how you had a list of collaborating institutions?
So not like receiving sub-awards necessarily, but if they have any active participants from that campus?
Yeah, exactly. If they're receiving money from it, they're out, okay? So let's go through each one in a little bit more detail. Let's talk about ECORs. So what you find is the ECOR RI program aims to support 3 major goals, right? It empowers you to do this. Number 1 is address challenges and opportunities in research infrastructure that is specific to your current and evolving needs in science and the ecosystem. Number two, build capacity for jurisdiction-wide investigator expertise into critical masses for sustained effective research and education partnership funding. And number three, develop pathways to broaden the participation of institutions and individuals in the jurisdiction's research ecosystem. So to be eligible, right, to apply for an ECOR, one, you need to be EPSCoR eligible, right? You've got to be one of the 28 jurisdictions. I know, I just had to say it. Secondly, you have to have an active jurisdictional steering committee with current bylaws. And number three, you need to have a jurisdictional science and technology plan. Same as always, right? The PI must be affiliated and employed by an eligible organization in EPSCoR jurisdiction, and each collaborating institution or organization must be represented by a PI or at least one co-PI. Do note that the mechanism exists where you can do this both as a prime with subs that you're used to, or as collaborative awards. Okay, so just putting that out there. Number of proposals per organization, just like track 2 in a way. What you can do is an institution may only lead on a single ECOR and a single ERISE. Okay? There is no limit on the number of submissions per jurisdiction. Send them to us. The other thing as well is that there is, in terms of co-PIs and PIs, you may only be a co-PI or a PI on a single award or proposal. However, you may be a senior personnel in any number. Okay, very similar to the track 2 rules if you're familiar with those. So let's talk about the structure of these. There's more than one proposal per jurisdiction allowed. Additionally, we heard you, right? When we talked about this, we are more than happy, and this is respond directly to suggestion number 4, is that more than one ECOR per jurisdiction is allowed, and we are happy to fund more than one ECOR per jurisdiction. They've got to be awesome, right? But we are happy to fund more than one. Okay, and it obviously depends on availability of fund, you get that. What these are going to look like is they're going to be funded for $2 million a year for 4 years initially, and you're able to renew for another $2 million per year for an additional 4 years. 8 years total, $16 million per ECOR project is basically available. These are going to be through a cooperative agreement mechanism, and they are going to have a reverse site visit in year 3 to 4, and that's going to be part of the renewal process. I'll talk about renewal a little bit later. So this is our vision, right? The idea here is that these proposals should really bring together a time-bound, sustainable vision about how you're going to increase, specific to your jurisdiction, research infrastructure. That's the idea. And they should create these sustainable core efforts. That's what we expect. And you can pull this directly from the solicitation. I just copied and pasted. So what would this look like? Well, every single ECOR will have the same primary component. The first one is an administrative core. That's going to be a requirement. So if you think about the solicitation on the left-hand side, what your ECOR may look like on the right. So what you'll do is that administrative core, boom, that's going to be part of what you do. What does that look like? What could it look like? And again, everything I'm going to be going on here is things that we sort of think about, right? So the first is that administrative core's purpose is to broaden participation and collaboration. Know who's there across the entire jurisdiction. It's about connecting individuals, bringing everybody who wants to participate to find a place in the jurisdiction's research ecosystem. If you have somebody at Outer Mongolian State University in your jurisdiction and you wanted to connect them to this awesome Track 2 team, you have the ability to do that. Right? It's also going to be the driver for goals, metrics, and evaluation, right? It's going to be about working with and collaborating with your state EPSCoR committee to be able to get a bead and know how the jurisdiction's moving and evolving over time. It's about building leadership and communication capacity, and it's about jurisdictional development at the end of the day. And so what we see is hopefully over time, or what we expect to see, is that we'll get continual improvement and assessment of the jurisdictional research ecosystem, the fundamental thing underlying the machine that's driving underneath. So, how can the admin core make partnerships? Well, really it's up to you. You define it. Give us the best ideas you have. You are empowered with the freedom to tell us how you want to do it. ways that you could. I don't know, I'm just guessing on this. One mechanism could be seed funding, perhaps. Maybe connecting individuals to teams to teams, creating workshops that create non-obvious connections that release or that allow new and really impressive avenues to allow this to happen, to allow people to interact in ways that they never have before in your jurisdiction. So, and again, this is how it's seated. It's this whole ecosystem, and this is what you asked for. This is what you wanted. It's about connecting that entire ecosystem through these cores. So what could an e-core? What about the second part? Well, knowing and thinking about what your jurisdiction needs. Again, working and building that understanding, getting that true finger on the pulse of where you are. What we've done within the e-core solicitation is presented a great number of cores or potential cores. And notice one of them is called other, right? So I don't know how more. And when you look at these cores, they directly came from the suggestions that you provided in Future of EPSCoR. These directly address says suggestion 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 8, 10, 11, 12, 13, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19. But you have to prioritize. Okay? So what you'll do is you'll go in, you'll assess your jurisdictional strengths, weaknesses, challenges, barriers, and you select which cores you want to come in. They're modular. And you work on those for 4 years. So what does renewal look like? Things that we want to see. We want to see evidence of growing networks of people across the jurisdiction. The administrative core is providing the opportunities and broadening the participation of research in that research ecosystem. We want to see evidence that these cores are being successful and their stated goals are moving towards and attaining sustainability. We want to see the continued analysis of jurisdictional research ecosystems as they develop. We want you to be thoughtful about you. And again, what we're going to do is with this is the actual renewal will be part of a new solicitation that we've got about a year's breather to go in because we want to select feedback from you. We want to see how these work, how they implement as we build this, yeah? We're always listening and always trying to respond within the confines of here. So what it might look like, for example, is that you're here, you've been working on the broadening participation core and the research support core for 4 years. You've been working to understand your research ecosystem, developing metrics to know whether or not these are being successful, and you have measurable outcomes. When you think about the renewal, what you can do is you work with your state committee, right? You define how this is working, how it's moving, how your engine, your ecosystem is evolving. I'm a biologist, you got to let me off, right? How your ecosystem is evolving over time. And what you may find is you may find that your research support core, the idea of helping and building research capacity and PUIs and so forth is doing really well. So what you can do is once that becomes self-sustaining, define it any way you want. What you do is you then move that down for the renewal. You can modularly place in another core that you focus for the next 4 years. And meanwhile, continuing to build in that broadening participation. You can modulate this how you want, how it fits you in real time. You have never been able to do that with an NSF award before. Let's talk about ERIs. ERIs is really about the science, right? It's the state or the jurisdiction deciding where they want to be excellent in science and building that capacity. And it's about developing high-quality hypotheses, problem-driven research, and being the best in the world. I have worked with all of you for many years. I know the power of Track 2 and I know the power of Track 1 and the exceptional expertise that is in this room. This is to support the incubation of those ideas, to bring you to the playing field, to give you a seat at the table of science. So eligibility, it's exactly the same as the other slide, the equal one. There is one difference, and I've highlighted it here, is that you will need a pending or awarded proposal from any eligible entity within the jurisdiction in an e-core. You need that connector in place. Okay, and again, we know that this is happening in building as time goes on, right? But it's all basically the same. Just like with eCore, more than one proposal per jurisdiction is allowed. More than one ERISE per jurisdiction is allowed. We are so excited to see where you can go with this. These will be funded at $1.75 million for 4 years. The renewal will be $1.5 million for an additional 3 years. And those 3 years are about the idea. The first 4 years about getting the team together and getting that science rolling. Notice I'm using the word jurisdiction here, right? 123 times, right? Jurisdiction-wide, not single lab. Jurisdiction-wide in that science, yeah. And so the idea here is that this gives you, the first 4 years are about getting the team together, about getting them to work together and produce those data that you need. The second 3 years are all about what you're going to do with it. They provide you the pathway and the connector to think about things, ERCs, STCs, regional innovation engines, bioinstitutes, any of the above. Remember, I'm a biologist, sorry, don't hate me. Right? I still think that 5G is, no, I'm kidding. It gets confusing. Anyway, and so what this does is this relates to a potential total of 11.5 million. If you do the math on that, if your jurisdiction gets a single E-RISE and a single E-Core, that's $27 million. Just putting that out there. These will be monitored through a continuing grant mechanism. So the key features of these E-RISEs is, number one, to really build this jurisdiction-wide network in an area of science, right? To be excellent in an area of science as a jurisdiction. Number two, incorporation of diversity, equity, access, and culture of inclusion. That was something that we heard so loud and clear from the Future of EPSCoR report, and there it is, also in E-Cores as well. You'll see those very heavily emphasized throughout the E-Core call, so S16. It's about developing a skilled workforce that's relevant to the project, relative to the actual science itself. So it's not this big broad piece, it's that interlaced piece directly, sorry, screen went red, that's about that interrelate piece into the science itself, creating workforces that are responsive to the actual science you're doing. And what that does is that you also need to, if you're building towards a workforce, that's including humans and public, and local and state government and industry. And so thinking about that in a use-inspired or societal impact piece is also critical and important to make these incubators in this area of science sustainable within your jurisdiction. The other thing is that, as you can tell, to be open for those next 3 years, you've got to think about sustainability from the beginning, from the outset, from day one. With these. And as with everything, we expect a continual improvement cycle. So I'm a picture guy. When I imagine this, I think of these as a pyramid. Research at the top. We are the National Science Foundation, not the National Fluffy Foundation. Okay, it's about science at our core and our heart. But then at the same time, to be able to make research and science move forward, you've got to really think about how that's going to directly and unequivocally tie to your jurisdictions. The key way is through workforce development and also societal impact, right? You've heard many of our speakers talk about the importance and critical pieces of the critical importance of that, and that's reflected here. And this, of course, is seated within a constant idea of being reflective, of continual improvement and evaluation. And within that, thinking about the culture of inclusion. How do you involve individuals within these to have an opportunity to partake in science in your jurisdiction? And of course, this will be, of course, aimed towards sustainability within your jurisdiction. One thing I want to highlight, research field's open, baby, right? Go for it, okay? The thing is that it needs to be aligned and reflective of what your state needs are. And that should, of course, be in turn directly tied to your state S&T plan. Okay? So the idea here is the E-RISE RII incubators are intended to result in the sustainable infrastructure in the jurisdiction that positions research teams to be leaders. That's the idea. Renewal? Well, what we expect to see out of this, evidence of research excellence in the research topic. Evidence of elements towards being successful in your stated goals. You write your own test. And attaining sustainability. They will be sort of reviewed as well, and part of the renewal process we expect will be part of a reverse site visit. And again, there'll be more details in a solicitation to come. I am working on it now. Okay, just a heads up. So you will have it at least multiple years, or at least a year in advance. Okay. as we're working through. There are details relating to this in the solicitation now, but the individual details are forthcoming. So what's the time frame? Well, track 1, it's exactly the same cycle as what you're used to. Letters of intent are due July 20th, 2023. The full proposal is due August 23rd, 2023. And it is anticipated, as Sandra points out, that this will be the last RII Track 1 competition. Alternatively, you may submit to eCore. The full proposals are due December 6th. This was to give you time to pivot if needed. Or you can also submit July 9th, 2024. And what you'll find is that these will then take the place of, or the same time in the year as what the annually sort of Track 1 timeframe always was. Likewise, a month later, the E-Rises are due in, right? And you can see those January 16th, 2024, or alternatively August 2024, and they'll be due the second Tuesday in August thereafter. So what about support from NSF? As you've probably noticed, we have a lot of work to do, but we're excited to do that work with you, to partner with you. EPSCoR was set up initially in 1979 to be a statewide partnership between federal government and the state. Okay? And that's what we are. We always will be, and we will be here to help you accomplish this. There'll be a frequently asked questions coming soon. There'll be webinars. The first one is scheduled on eCore, 1 to 2 p.m. EST, May 29th, 2023. The second for eRISE is 1 to 2 p.m., May 30th, 2023. These will be recorded and public. I will also probably do another recording of this one to put it online. We're also open to meet with jurisdictions as needed. We're also happy to support workshops to develop these ideas both within your own jurisdiction, but also to connect the entire community. Because I don't see this as an individual statewide ecosystem. I see it as a connected EPSCoR ecosystem as well. And I think that's critical. We also have set up two email addresses where you can direct specific questions, anyone in the jurisdiction. EPSCoR is epscorcore-core@nsf.gov, eRISE, epscorrise@nsf.gov. They are open and active now. But at the end of the day, these come down to you. And this is what I think is really important. Read and digest the opportunity. Hopefully this presentation has helped you think about these, think about where our intentions are. Right, read and digest the opportunity. Second thing, these are about the jurisdiction. Spread the word to everyone. Right, it is only through the entire ecosystem that you can succeed as a jurisdiction. Revisit your jurisdiction's EPSCoR steering committees. Revisit your S&T plans. Don't hate me. Okay, and the last piece is reach out to each other, reach out to us, and reach out within your jurisdictions. At this point, I don't know how much time I have, probably none because I've gone over, but I will stop here. And yeah, thank you.
So Jennifer, as you're running to the mic, so is this on? Yeah. So we have about 10 minutes. We can answer questions. Again, I think it would be most, yeah, sure, come on, Jen. It would be most helpful if folks take the needed time to actually go through the solicitation. A lot of questions you'll probably be able to answer yourself once you read the solicitation, and you just haven't had a chance to do that yet. We wanted to share this, high-level briefing. Know that we're going to have several opportunities for you to engage with us. All program officers will work in eRISE and eCore, so you can feel free to reach out to the via the aliases that JD shared. And I should publicly say JD has done an incredible amount of work to get us to this point for both of these programs, and we're extremely grateful for the leadership, JD, you've showed in this space. And so thank you there. And then there was something I was going to say about online, and I forgot what it was. JD, one thing is the May 29th date is Memorial Day, and I know you don't want to work on Memorial Day, so you may want to let's look at that.
That is actually what I was going to say.
Okay.
I will reset the days. Yeah. It's illegal for me to work that day, right? So yeah, no, we'll set something.
All right, let's open the floor to questions, comments, anything. And folks online, I'll be checking the online chat, and JD and I are both available to bounce back and forth. Jennifer first, and Gina has the mic, and Chi-Chi's going to grab that one. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. All right, I have two questions, really. The number one question, or one of the questions is, okay, three questions, I'm sorry. So is the general NSF rule, I noticed in the solicitation, I did read the solicitations. I noticed in the solicitation that it does say that, collaboration is encouraged but not required, and that each institution that's collaborating must be represented with either a PI or a co-PI. So my question is the standard NSF rule of a max of 1 PI and 4 co-PIs still in place for these?
Do you want me to answer?
Do you want me to get it?
Yes, there's a minute.
Yeah. So with the collaboration piece, right? There's two ways you can do it, right? You can either do it as a prime with subs, or you can do it as a collaborative award, which gives you infinite number of PIs,
Okay,
right?
so it doesn't
That's one
apply
way.
for, if you want to apply as a prime, you can have additional sub-awards with people
Yeah.
as senior personnel, but they're not.
Correct. Yeah. And it's, and what we've found is that as we've made the transition to sort of the new e.gov, it actually allows for additional collaborators because they kind of don't, or additional co-PIs because we're not restricted by the piece of paper anymore.
Okay,
I know
so
that sounds stupid.
That language is more specific if you're submitting as a collaborative proposal mechanism in that process.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. And then what was your first question? I'm sorry.
The other question is, or another question is, so we're in year 3, we're approaching year 4, and is there any chance, and part of this may just be basic grants administration that I just don't know because I'm not an expert in that field, but what if one of my institutions decides to decline my year 4 sub-award so that they can individually pursue one of these awards earlier?
So we look at who was involved when we made the award. So we can't skirt the system and drop out of a funded project so that you can apply for one of the new mechanisms. We look at who was involved when we made the award to the institution.
Okay, so technically they could do that, but like you're saying, y'all would not approve of that.
No, because we would consider them to be a part of a funded Track 1 award.
Okay.
Yep. Cool. And Jennifer, if you can hang out there, but let's just make sure we have time for a couple other people, and then you can. So, question in the back.
Yeah, Kentrell Dorner, South Dakota. I had a question about the steering committees. Multiple opportunities for e-rises, multiple opportunities for e-cores. Is there multiple opportunities for multiple steering committees and multiple statewide research and technology plans, and how might that work? When I read parts of the solicitation, I haven't read it all, admittedly, but it didn't sound like we're locked into one steering committee for one jurisdiction. Could you comment on that, please?
Sure. So the expectation is that the respective jurisdiction would have a single steering committee. It's not called out, but the steering committee should be the committee for the jurisdiction. And so having separate steering committees would make this more of a siloed effort rather than a jurisdictional effort.
Will there be language that language that you just said? Will that come out in printed form in some way?
If it's helpful, we can certainly put it in the FAQ. But
that would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay. If you have a question, you can. I think the mics are gone, but they're rotating, and you just raise your hand, Jennifer, while we're transitioning. And I don't see anything online yet. So,
my final question really is, what guardrails, I guess, do you have in place? Like, JD, you're talking about how many times some of those words, jurisdiction, was in the solicitation. Must is only in there 80 times, and should is in there 90 times.
No, notice there was no shall.
Right.
So
what guardrails are in place, aside from, we're going to handle things in the review process informally? What guardrails are in place to prevent further disparities between the well-resourced institutions and emerging research institutions in our states?
Yeah, so part of that also comes down to our faith. So NSF's merit review process is the gold standard, right? And we have to put our faith in that. We will be doing significant work with and I can tell you this from the program officer point, I know that Sandra will also have comments, but we will be doing significant work with our review committees as we go through these to really talk about exactly these disparities you're talking about. So you have my promise on that as a program officer, and I know every single one of my colleagues in EPSCOR would feel the same way.
Okay, I see the lines lining up, which is great. Let me take a question from online. Can existing Track 1 institutions partner in an E-Corps lead by a non-Track 1 campus? Can existing Track 1 institutions partner in an E-Core, I think led by a non-Track 1 campus?
Yeah.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Okay, facilitators, can you help me? Whoever's next and has the mic?
I've got
Okay.
a question. So considering this sort of modular ecosystem context and the fact that you can submit multiple proposals, it seems like it would be really helpful to get feedback from NSF EPSCoR on sort of a multi-year approach so the modules could be coordinated. I mean, that seems like it would be really helpful to the jurisdiction, and it would help us deliver what you want most effectively.
I think that if I was in a particular jurisdiction's thing, that's exactly what you just outlined is exactly what I would be doing. Not necessarily, you don't need us to develop a multi-layered strategy of how I'd implement these.
But
Absolutely.
feedback on that strategy, in other words, which modules might come in consecutive proposals would be really helpful.
But you need to know what your jurisdiction's needs are and prioritize those and provide us with the information. You sell it to your peers, because at the end of the day, we don't make a decision, right? It's the merit review that makes the decision, right? That provides us that feedback. It's how you articulate that within these and showing these are the parts that you need. You know what I mean? But a multi-layered strategy is this is exactly what we want you to do. Understand what your jurisdictional needs are, what your challenges are, right? Prioritize those and say why you're going for them. And then, you're going to end up with probably more than one E-Core's worth. So work out which ones they are and then layer them in. It's going to be unique to Montana, right? Or unique to Guam or Virgin Islands or South Carolina. This is the beauty of this. There is no one right answer. It's for you to, this is what we're empowering you to do, is exactly this.
Okay, we're going to take 3 more questions. If you guys don't mind cutting into your break time, and if you want to go a little further and just do a walking break, that's fine. But if folks can line up so we kind of know, gentlemen, you've been there for a while. You can go if you want. The young lady in the middle can go next, and then third. Okay. Why don't you go? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I was curious about if there are multiple E-Cores, how the EPSCoR has thought about competing demands on the steering committee in terms of time, effort, and those sorts of things.
5%.
Yeah, and this is why it's one.
And this is one of the reasons we put the 5% provision so that the steering committee could, if need be, hire the needed resources to help with that. So there's budgeted allowance to support that in terms of human demands at the steering committee level.
And also the E-Cores, would be connected, right? As they're moving through. They can be loose connections, but that's the ecosystem is not isolated, right? It's connected. And so the E-Cores should be connecting, right? To work through these, and the other piece, just going back to the steering committee question as well, there'll be one steering committee, but there's nothing to say you can't pass out the duties across the steering committee, right? It's how you define it.
I'll just point out, though, sometimes it's not just resources in terms of monetary to support steering committees, it's actual time, particularly in small jurisdictions where those steering committee members have wearing multiple hats. So.
And if I can just add, this goes back to the overall jurisdictional framework for both of these efforts. We are not expecting to see single institution submissions. Those would not be competitive. So in a smaller jurisdiction, you may be in a case where you will only have one ERISE and one E-Core submission. That's reasonable based on the resources within the respective jurisdiction. For larger jurisdictions, that may not be reasonable.
You have two submission dates. Can you hear me? Yes. You have 2 submission dates in the next fiscal year, one in the winter, one in the summer for both programs. How many awards do you expect to make for each cycle? Will it be 18 and 15 for the entire fiscal year, or for each of those submissions?
So depending on availability of fund, I don't remember, I'm presuming the numbers you just quoted is what's from the solicitation, that's annually. Those numbers are annual, but always dependent on funding.
And how awesome your proposals are. Just putting that out there.
Okay, question in the chat: is an E-Core award in a jurisdiction required before they can be awarded an E-Rise? Let me take. So the language in the solicitation is that there should be a pending, at minimum, a pending E-Core submission in order for an E-Rise to be submitted. Because this will be a phased approach, we don't expect jurisdictions to have E-Cores right now. We're not going to hold back an E-Rise award in these initial stages if there's not an E-Core award made yet, but there at minimum has to be a pending submission. That's the language in the solicitation, pending. But notice the whole rationale behind the E-Core. E-Core is critical, really, for the success of E-Rise. So when we think about more long-term, there will be a different response. Okay, do we have any burning question? Before folks were nodding when we said we could go a little longer for a break. If there's a burning question, we can plan to cut out at 5 after the hour.
Really just a comment about the nature of EPSCoR Track 1s as genuine state-federal partnerships, which they have been. And, it's clear that the cost match is gone, which has a plus side and a downside. For many of our states, that is what forces our states to come into it as a state-federal partnership. So I just really wanted to comment on that implication.
Thank you for mentioning that. We are in full agreement. We spent hours and hours and hours having these conversations, so thank you.